Alright, so thanks for tuning into my presentation today. I'll be talking a little bit about racial prejudice and discrimination in the US. After reading Just Mercy, I realized that it's a bigger problem than I realized, and I wanted to discuss a little bit about why it's so important to me and why I think it's important to us as well as BYU students and citizens of the US. So jumping in, this is what we'll be covering today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me afterwards. So starting off, why is the issue so important to me? I feel like it's a lot about justice because I was born into this world, and I feel like I have the same rights that anyone else who is born into this world has. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, all the above, right? So just because I was born into this world doesn't make me better or worse than anyone else, because we were all children of God and we all deserve the same rights here on earth. I feel like it has a huge impact on society as well. Not just like a little one-time small moment in our lives, but it's something that has lasting impact and creates prejudices in our lives. It also has a lot of lingering effects. For example, the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement that were 100, 200 years ago are still having effects today because we haven't completely become accepting about others just based on what they look like. And I included Amendment 14 in here because the country was founded upon equality, and the amendments were kind of to establish the law of the land, right? And as citizens of the United States, we can't discriminate on if we're black or if we're white or something else as well. We should all be treated as equal citizens. And so the data up front shows kind of one side to this issue. I'm sure we've all seen statistics like this where black people are incarcerated at 8, 9, 10 times as much as white people. But there's a lot of underlying reasons that aren't shown. So there's two arguments made for this, that the statistics are lying and that they're not. So for that they are, I'm going to give an example for this, so I hope it makes sense. But I was talking to my uncle about, I guess, how people with a master's degree usually out-earn people without. And he told me it's not necessarily because they get a master's degree that it means that you'll earn more. It's because that people that do master's degrees are hardworking people in general and also smarter and are more qualified. And that's why they're making more. So it doesn't matter if you're doing the master's degree. He just said be the type of person that can do a master's degree or PhD or whatever. That's the principle that I'm trying to teach here. So a lot of these statistics don't necessarily give the reasoning behind it. But there's also an argument that they are not lying and that there's not necessarily biases in the studies because they're professional studies that try to remove this stuff and they're very professionally done, right? So my views prior to reading Just Mercy, I kind of thought it was a rare occurrence with no lasting impact. I'd seen these statistics before, but I was kind of cautious about believing them. And especially I believe that it had limited scope of impact, meaning that it was kind of just between the perpetrator and the person being affected. So for example, let's say a cop is being racist towards a black person, it's kind of just affecting those two and no one else. But especially after reading the book, I realized that it has a huge effect on the family members and other people involved as well. And it created a larger understanding for me about what discrimination is and how it has real lasting consequences that don't just clear up and solve themselves within a minute after the issue. And so I felt like the book Just Mercy had a huge call to action at the end, meaning that as citizens, as people, we should treat each other with love. And I realized the author, I don't think he's a member, I honestly don't know, but as members of the church, we know that we are all God's children, and we have a special duty to treat others as if they are our brothers and sisters, because they literally are. And so my life will be different based on this call to action. I want to make sure that my thoughts, my actions, and my relationships are improved because of this. Obviously, I'll treat people with respect. I'll treat them as equals and for who they are, more than just the color of their skin. And in my thoughts, I guess this will come before, but I really got to think about what I want to say and if it will be a positive or a negative statement. And that will obviously, these two together will improve my relationships with the people I interact with. I feel like my ability to discuss this, there's two graphs that I can show. So they're a little simple and a little funny, but my knowledge of the subject, I feel like I got it down. Like I can have this conversation with someone on the plane and have plenty of things to say because I've had tons of research and tons of experience about it. But the issue I have is discussing this topic with other people because a lot of people have these biases in them. And I've had situations where I've tried talking about racial discrimination and injustices with other people, and they tell me that because I'm white, I cannot have an opinion on this subject. So I feel a little bit, I guess, attacked and I don't know what the word is, demoralized because of that. So for most of the general population, I would have no problem discussing this with them. But because there are people that don't necessarily trust me and invalidate my opinion because of the color of my skin, it's a little ironic, but I don't necessarily feel confident about discussing the subject with certain people. And so that is the presentation that I have about racial injustice in the US. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'd love to clarify some of the stuff I said. And I did interview one of my friends just to see how it was as a black person growing up in the US and his experiences with discrimination and inequality in the US. So if you're curious about that, I got the link to that as well. Just kind of back up some of the ideas I presented in this presentation. Thanks again.